Hi everyone, this is Alex Mathers. Welcome to another episode. I'm joined today by Dot Lung, who is a social media expert and strategist. She describes herself as having found her true purpose through social media. She's also what she calls a digital extremist. Welcome to the show, Dot. Great to have you here.
Thank you for the amazing introduction.
No worries.
I never thought of myself as an extremist, but I guess, I'm a pretty extreme person.
Yeah, well, I'm interested to know a little bit more about that, and because obviously I'm reading this off your website, so this is how you describe yourself: digital extremist. I think in an age where everyone is kind of feeling overwhelmed, I guess you could say, by social media and all the different avenues you could use to help you be seen and to build your brand. I like the confidence around just stating the fact that you're an extremist, which kind of goes against the grain a little bit. How would you? Uh, I guess what kind of insights can you give us around that phrase, the digital extremist?
Well, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. It's just what it is. I'm constantly connected with my phone. I've always been super, um, you know, connected on every social media platform since, let's say, Zanga. Have you heard of Zanga?
I
It was
haven't
like
heard of that. No.
it was like an old blogging platform back in the day before like Blogger was even out, before MySpace, during the times of Friendster. Have you heard of Friendster?
Friendster, I know, yes. I go back a bit. So Friendster is certainly something I can remember. Zenga, it sounds like a video game. I don't know. I don't know the blogging platform.
Zanga, yeah.
Yeah.
All the Asian kids at my high school were on it, so it was like the thing to be blogging on.
All the cool kids. Yeah, gotcha.
So I don't know. I guess the extremist part of me is that I literally do not have a differentiation between my online life and my offline life.
Wow.
Um, I live equally to the extreme or the max on, social media networks as well as offline. So I guess digital extremist just means I'm full on, with
Yeah.
my life, my digital life.
I guess that kind of makes sense, seeing that you're in the world of social media strategy and helping other companies and people with their social media branding and content distribution and stuff like that. But obviously, you've got people who probably share quite a few of the ways of dealing with social media as you, who aren't in that kind of a business. And it's just funny to think that you've got a lot of people who are probably extremists, just like you, who are pretty much glued to the phone, whereas you're actually doing it for a career. So that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about
Right.
the career side. Yeah.
Right. And you have to know that I didn't know that social media was going to actually become a job title.
Yeah.
When I started getting into it, it was something that I did for fun. It was a hobby. Used it to stay connected and learn more about different types of people, in my neighborhood or on the other side of the world. So it really just came about when I had moved to Barcelona 8 years ago. And I had no idea what I was going to do for work. And, one of my professors at the time said, "Hey, you look like you are posting on Facebook nonstop. Why don't you help us post for the Off Festival?" And that's where we met, at
Yeah.
the Barcelona festival. And that was actually my first client. I didn't know that you could get clients doing social media. What
Yeah.
was that, in 2011, 2012?
Sometime around then, yes. Yeah. I was over there in Barcelona giving a talk and stumbled across the work you were doing, and I was pretty impressed that you could create an amazing career through, as you say, the social media stuff. Awesome.
Honestly, I have to be honest, I'm surprising myself every day.
Yeah.
It's now more valuable than it was, 10 years ago. I'm constantly, being approached with tons of different projects, and everybody, really needs help with how to actually present their company or their business or their personal brand online. And that's what I help people with. I help people figure out, what to say, where to say it,
Yeah.
and, how to say it.
Right. So I'm interested to
So,
hear a little bit more about the, I guess briefly, the story leading into finding your first client in the form of off in Barcelona. What kind of got you to
oh,
Barcelona in the first place, and how did you develop into creating a career out of the social media stuff?
so I'm a failed graphic designer. Okay.
Hmm.
I really wanted to come to Barcelona originally to study graphic design because I loved all of the imagery and everything that I was seeing when I was living in Los Angeles. And in LA, I had a ton of different jobs, always, in marketing and in real estate, in, biotech, in Hollywood. And
Hmm.
I did a lot of different things. But 8 years ago, when I decided to move to Barcelona, I said, I really love creativity. I love graphic design. I'm going to give myself, a shot at it. So I enrolled myself into this design master program called
Mm.
Off Atelier at the time.
Hmm.
And this was basically a 9-month master class to give you hands-on how to actually create a graphic campaign for Off Festival. So,
Mm.
I applied, I got in, had the best 9 months of my life, meeting people and creatives from all over the world, working with some amazing artists. As you know, the off community has a spectacular community of
Yeah,
creative people, and
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
got to work with these people. But after 9 months, after the program's over, I was in the same spot as when I arrived to Barcelona. I was looking for a job. I didn't know what I could do. My design skills were still very basic. I couldn't really use Adobe Illustrator. I still can't.
I,
Um,
yeah.
but you know what I did? I literally emailed everyone I knew. I gave myself the summer in Ibiza and I just like partied my brains out.
Hmm.
Um, as one should after a master's program.
Of course.
And and then after I was like, okay, I have to get a job now or else I'm going to have to move back to LA. My dream was to live abroad, live in Spain and travel
Yeah.
the world.
Mm.
So I emailed literally everyone I knew, everyone that I had met during, my 9 months in Barcelona. I said, listen, I'm willing to do anything. I want to learn more about design. I want to work in a creative agency or advertising place. Do you have anything available? Do you know of anything? I'm
Yeah.
willing to work for anything.
Right.
And, one I actually got an internship with a web design studio and I also had, my teacher at the time offered me to work with the Off Festival. My teacher was also happened to be the founder of the festival.
Mm.
And he's the one that was like, hey, you seem like you post on Facebook every day. You're always on social media. Why don't you help me manage all of the social media accounts? And I said, absolutely. But one thing, if you want me to do this, you need to open an Instagram account because at that point they didn't have an Instagram yet.
Right.
So that is how it all started. I opened the
Mm.
Instagram account for them, and in 9 months, we just exploded. At that time, there was zero paid media, so it was a lot easier to grow, a lot easier to,
Yeah.
attract the right sort of audience. And that's kind of how my name got passed around from word of mouth, from one festival to the next festival, and just
Mm.
really working really hard on building these communities, sharing amazing content, and getting the conversation going within
Yeah.
our own industry.
Nice. So talk about having a really, I mean, that sounds like the dream job because you were kind of doing all that stuff anyway because it was fun and you were drawn to it and you were always playing around on social media and playing with gadgets and the phone. And so it was kind of like a match made in heaven, shall we say?
It
Sounds like,
absolutely was.
yeah.
It really is a dream job for me. I loved every moment that I had the opportunity to actually get paid to do what I love doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it didn't happen, overnight. Like I mean, I was making 500 euros a month on my dream job. So,
Mm,
it wasn't exactly paying all the bills, but it was something that I was really, really good at. And, uh, I got results.
yeah.
So one thing led to another. Other festivals started wanting to, ask for my services. Obviously, I didn't know anything about business. I don't know how to price what I do, the value
Mm,
that I'm bringing.
yeah.
So at that time, I think I was like 25. Now 8 years later, my business has, I don't know, 1,000 times fold. Like was charging 500 euros a month. Now my retainer starts at 5,000 euros a month.
Sweet.
Um, so, I mean, yeah, it took a long time to get there, but it's it's definitely changed. And I literally learned everything just on my own.
Yeah.
And social media is obviously a really new industry.
Hmm.
And learning how to create Instagram communities and how all the social media technicality stuff works, learned everything without a textbook, because listen, there's no textbook on it
Right.
yet.
Yeah. There must be a huge amount of innovation and creativity that you're bringing to the job in and of itself, right? You kind of have that flexibility, I imagine, of being able to just suggest something kind of out of the blue and see how it goes and experiment and see how that works, right?
The first, couple months of starting any new account, it's always experimentation. It's experimenting with as many different types of formats, different creatives as possible, to see what actually resonates with the audience. Now, because I've been doing this for many, many years, I can tell you right off the bat what's going to work and what's not.
Hmm.
But, in the beginning, or if, you're starting uh, this at home by yourself, you need to create as much as possible and test to see what actually resonates and what
Mm,
doesn't. And that's how you learn,
yeah.
trial and error. That's literally how I learned.
Yeah, of course. So I imagine over the last 8 years or so, the industry must have, it's probably shifted quite a lot. Do you get the sense that the companies that you're working with and companies in general have more of a kind of savviness around social media, or do you think it's still a case of them kind of being in the dark about this kind of stuff?
It's half and half, I would
Yeah.
say. They know that they need to have it, but even some of the, biggest startups I work with are, you know, fairly large corporate companies. There's
Mm,
no process yet. It's a new, very, very new department.
mm,
And that's where I come into play, because I help these companies get all their ducks in a row. So if they need to build a team, I'm able to, source out the people and train the people. If they need to, figure out what their social media strategy and who they need to hire, that's something I do as well. So it just really depends. What is great is a lot of these younger companies by millennials and digital vertical brands, they're on top of it.
yeah.
So it just depends what industry you're coming from, I think.
Hmm.
But what's really noticeable now is that it's social media is, a very, very high priority.
Yeah. So for those companies and those people and those organizations who might be feeling a little bit cold towards social media and not quite see the purpose behind it and not quite see the reason and why you'd have to bother and like where the ROI is and all that kind of stuff. And I know you've probably been asked this quite a few times, but I'd be keen to hear your take on how you might present the very fundamentals of why someone would need a social media presence. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, social media and branding is really the long game, right? You're not
Mm,
going to reap all of the benefits and results overnight or in the short term. That's not how it works.
mhm.
The way to really succeed is having a strategic plan for your brand and your communication online for many years to come.
Okay.
Why is this so important? Well, I don't know about you, but the minute that I hear about a new product or a new website or a new company or any company or any brand for that matter, I go literally check out if they have an Instagram account.
Mm.
If they are not on Instagram or if they're not on Facebook, it's totally irrelevant to me. Um, I'm not, I'm not going to be able to get the information where I want to be getting the information.
Yeah.
And that, that's for a restaurant, if that's for, any sort of consulting business. It's just a necessary part of your public image.
Mm.
So if you're a business, B2C or B2B, and you have a website, most likely you will also, have a social media account somewhere.
Mm.
And the ROI, regarding your question about, the return on investment, it really depends on, at the end of the day, what you're measuring as ROI. Because,
Right.
what is the value of a brand like Apple or like Nike? It's like the same question of, how much is a logo actually worth?
Mm.
Right? The Nike logo was worth, nothing when they first started, but now it's a, multi-billion-dollar brand, and that brand is worth a lot of money. So
What do you think it is about? I mean, what's happened to increase the value in that, in the logo? Is there something that you can kind of quantify that's behind the increase in value? Tricky
well, it's
question, I know.
everything that it's everything that the brand is doing. So
Right.
it's not just the people that are working in branding, it's also the people that are marketing the brand as well. And
Yeah.
it's taken, many years to build, such as social media. Your brand takes, the best thing you can do on social media is branding. Okay,
Yeah.
that's like the first and foremost purpose of what you can use social media for, is
What
for
does
your
that
brand.
look like? Is that just showing your face as a freelancer, for example, or showing your team as a company? How might that work?
Sure, it depends on how you want the public to perceive your company or your brand. So
Mm.
that might be, in a very authentic way, sharing what it might be to work at your company, what your company's values are, what the company sees as, really important uh, way of work.
Yeah.
It really depends on it really depends on what the brand direction of is for the brand, right?
Yeah.
So I can't really answer that question, but it is important to showcase that, especially if you're trying to recruit people to work at your company. A lot of millennials, they look at the company's Instagram account to see if this is, a place that they would want to work at.
Right. So I can see social media branding being particularly useful for companies who have a demographic that includes, the younger guys, the guys who are a little bit more savvy with social media, because they're going to automatically jump to Instagram and Snapchat and stuff to see content around that company. So I can see that. But what about if you had a kind of a more old school company who had, I guess, a more minimalist ideal in terms of like how they presented themselves, and they were just like, okay, we're just going to have a website and it's going to be nice and simple. Why do we need social media?
It depends if you want to be part of the conversation or not. So the
Hmm.
social media networking, it's what's happening now. It's having your share of voice in important conversations and topics. So if you want to be like the leader in, I don't know, let's use an example, like somebody literally sent me a LinkedIn message about how they should, market their lumber company. Okay, they're
Okay.
selling wood.
Yeah.
Um, I think this is the type of company you're talking about, something that's, not like a digital company, but a
Yeah, I guess.
traditional
Yeah. Yeah.
company. And, why, how they can, make lumber relevant, and why is it relevant for this company to be present on LinkedIn? It is
Mm.
super important, because you as a business need to be at the top of mind of anybody when they think about lumber or wood, or buying wood for their home or commercial building. People
Yeah.
need to think of your brand and your name first,
Mm.
right? So having to be at someone's top of mind is a priceless position to
Right.
be, because if anybody decides that, they need this type of business, they know your name. And
Mm.
that's what's literally happened, to even my personal business, is whenever somebody in my network is like, oh, they need social media, they're like, okay, call Dot. So I'm most of my business has only come through referrals. Not
Yeah.
only,
Okay.
but it's a big part of it.
Mm.
Because I'm constantly posting on social media, I'm talking about what I'm working on, so I'm at the
Mm.
top of people's minds.
So I can really start seeing the power now of social media. I've got this, but I want to just make this extra clear for anyone listening who's not so sure about social media. I think the real value, the real power in having an identity and content across many platforms is just the ability to be seen by more people, right? It's to have it's to put out those feelers and those tentacles to be able to get front of mind, as you say, amongst more people, rather than just relying on someone to come to you and maybe stumble across your website kind of by accident type thing. It's much more deliberate in getting your stuff out into the world, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's very traditional. Okay, it's called word of mouth marketing, and
Yeah.
this is how in the past and in modern times it's just switched. It just updated on a platform called social media, and that's
Uh-huh.
Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. But it existed, in the before the internet was around, and that was plain old word of mouth. It's
Yeah.
just now even easier to get people talking about you. Um,
Yeah, it's
through
kind of
these
it's like
digital
word of
media.
mouth with a little twist, kind of
Exactly.
incorporating
It's
more content, more stuff, visual stuff for the eyes, stuff for the
yeah,
ears.
instead of talking on the telephone, it's like talking, via WhatsApp. It's the
Yeah.
same, it's exactly the same, um, it's the same thing.
Mm. But that's a key thing, I think, to distinguish is the idea that social media lends itself and kind of stimulates word of mouth, which is um, totally an old school way of doing stuff. I mean, things haven't really changed at all in that respect, in that one of the most powerful ways to continue getting business in whatever industry you're in is to have people talking about you and reaching out to you and recommending you and referring you, right? So social media has that power of stirring that kind of conversation up.
Absolutely. And traditionally, the reason why social media was even invented was to have basic one-to-one communication. This is why Twitter was invented. This was why Facebook was invented. Um,
Yeah, well, think of
Later
Facebook.
kind of
Yeah, think of how, it was just a way of getting students to be able to communicate with one another, right?
exactly.
Mm.
And we overthink things. We just have to get down to the basics. What is it that you're trying to communicate, and how will you distribute this, what you're trying to communicate? Will it be
Mm.
on social media? Will it be, through a newsletter, printed newsletter? It's just another channel
Yeah,
for um, communication.
right. And I think one of the things that is worth bearing in mind when thinking about social media is that it's about creativity, isn't it? It's like if you don't have a willingness to kind of relax into it and have fun and to create and to be creative and innovative, then you're probably going to have a hard time with social media. Right? I get the sense, right? I think it's very much about a kind of open playing field for people who want to have fun and try new things. Otherwise, if you're not willing to do that kind of stuff, then you might find I can totally see why you'd have difficulty with social media. It just feels like work. So as I see social media, it really helps me to think of it in terms of a kind of playground where I can have fun.
Absolutely. I think you bring up a really good point that you really do need to enable yourself, allow yourself to play and enjoy the
Mm.
creation process
Yeah.
when you're creating social media content. This is why now more than ever, artists and creatives and digital creators are becoming such massive influencers on these platforms, because they are literally creating something new every day. So if you're a creative, this is literally a digital renaissance for you to create and share your vision and your creativity with the world through these platforms. So that's one thing that's really elevated, that you couldn't do back on a telephone, right?
Right.
Now we can, use video, and we can use GIFs and cinemagraphs and stop motion. There's so much digital creativity that is happening. And if you're like just a little bit creative, and you can do this consistently, that's an amazing social media strategy for you.
Yeah, it's a
And
nice way of thinking about it, rather than getting too hung up on likes and follows and that kind of stuff, which is obviously a nice additional bonus that comes off the back of focusing on the creative aspect, I'd say.
I mean, if you are not enjoying the social media process and the process of creating for it, it's definitely going to feel like work.
Yeah.
And I think, the people that are successful on social media, they are actually enjoying creating the content and practicing servitude,
Hmm.
creating this content for their audience. This is something that is really, really important. If you're not enjoying the process, like you're not going to create good content. It's not going to be, um, you know, you're not going to come across to your audience as
Right.
enjoying it. It's people will know that it was forced, or it wasn't, it
Yeah.
wasn't natural.
Well, this is the thing. You talk about the willingness to create and have fun, right? And you're kind of doing it for yourself, in that you're enjoying the process of it, but at the same time you're in that servitude of thinking about giving to the audience that you have in mind. How do you find that sweet spot? Is there a kind of like an overlap, right?
So at the end of the day, it depends on your personality, I guess.
Yeah.
If you are going to be, creating this social media account to purposely serve, is it for your selfish purposes so that you have an outlet to, post your own drawings or your own designs? Or are you using this, these platforms to actually really help other people and
Mm,
serve your target market or your audience? So
right.
I think those are two different things, and it comes down to what your purpose is,
Mm,
to figure out, you know, why it is you do what you do, and why are you doing it?
mm,
Because if you don't know why you're doing it, it's going to be very difficult, um, to have a purpose
the
and
drive
be
to do it.
posting
Yeah.
every day, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, Alex, do you know what your why is, or your purpose? Why are
Well,
you creating this podcast?
yeah. Well, I find myself being drawn to creating a lot. I find that I get a lot of joy out of being able to create something that brings me fulfillment, right? So there is that kind of, I suppose it's a kind of selfishness, but it's just me being in flow with the creative work, and I enjoy doing that. But I also, when I create, I have my audience in mind at the same time, so I'm kind of holding up those two plates at the same time. So while I create for me, but I'm also creating for me because I know that other people are going to benefit from that or enjoy it in the same way that I enjoyed creating it. And I always find that when I create something where I didn't have the spark and I was kind of bored while doing it and I didn't really feel it, then that's the kind of content that usually flops, because the audience just don't find that same spark. So that's what I would say is like is first and foremost, create stuff that creates the spark in you, right? Because that'll have the most profound, I think, effect on your audience.
Absolutely.
And no doubt this is kind of how you create the stuff that you create, right? I'm sure you've had better engagement and
Sure. Yeah.
more interest in following with stuff that you've enjoyed creating, right?
Sure, exactly. But at the end of the day, like your question was, which I totally get, because sometimes you're like, oh, I'm going to post this because I want to post it, or are you posting it, because it's going to get higher engagement,
Mm.
or you're posting it just for your fans.
Yeah.
So I think you have to think about what percentage of your strategy you're dedicating to stuff that makes you feel good and that you want to create and you want to put out there. And then part of it is a part of your strategy is also to serve the people and
Yeah.
give them what they ask for. And hopefully
Yeah.
the ones that, ideally those are one and the same, right?
Yeah,
Your audience
I
is
think that's the key thing, isn't it? It's kind of having a piece of content in mind that you're going to create for an audience, but then within the confines of creating for those people, you create something that's a lot of fun for you as well. Does that make
exactly,
sense? Yeah.
totally.
So I guess that's where the kind of overlap is. It's like you are creating ultimately for the people following you, but it doesn't mean you don't have to be expressive and have fun with the actual creation. Yeah.
Yeah. For example, like everyone asks me like, "Oh, how come you don't do more video? Like, you don't do so much video content."
Mm.
Well, first of all, I don't enjoy being on video.
Yeah.
It's not like one of my most favorite things. I know I have to do more of it, but that's not something I enjoy. I'm much better at, you know, sharing carousel posts or, doing writing out content. So this is how you can figure out what percentage of your content will actually be, video versus audio versus, mini blog posts. You should actually just do the stuff that you enjoy doing and that comes easy to you.
Mm.
Uh, so I'm not planning on becoming, a crazy video content creator anytime soon because, actually editing video is really hard.
Right.
But I think that's why with now Instagram Live, which I noticed that you're getting into with the IGTV thing, is you can just let the video roll and you don't have to think about editing it because it's like a
Yeah.
live recording.
I think it was because I always was a little bit resistant to having my face on video, but it was only until I was able to kind of create more relaxed. I think IGTV was the platform that introduced me to just sort of just going for it and putting myself on video, even though I didn't really feel up for it at least initially. I think it was because it was kind of in a more informal, relaxed environment. I didn't because I had in my mind all those kind of corporate videos that I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
too interested in making that put me off for a bit. But then I got into it, and I think it's worth experimenting because I think it's easy to give a kind of assessment about yourself too soon in terms of what you could explore and be good at potentially that might
Mm-hmm.
surprise you. And I'm getting better at it. I'm certainly by no means, um, you know, in my perfect environment when it comes to videos, but I'm learning a lot, and I see the video stuff as a means to grow and expand a little bit, even if it's not always that fun. So I would say there's probably like a kind of gray area where you can experiment a bit as well.
Well, totally. We're all learning together. I mean, all IGTV was literally just released, last summer or 2 summers
Yeah.
ago. So we're all learning how it works together. And I think what's so interesting is many creatives, I think it's not just you and I, a lot of creatives are shyer or, we're already,
Mm.
a shy group of people. So
Yeah.
putting anything out there like of our face, this is why we are in arts and we do creativity, so we don't have to put our face out there.
Right.
But I know for my business is that it's so important to, especially for what I do in social media and having a personal brand, is to put my face out there. And I knew I had to do this you can take a look at my Instagram account. Like I never really posted any photos of me. And then I had to like literally force myself to start posting selfies of me.
Right. But that's really interesting
Basically,
because I'm thinking about mine. Sorry to butt in, but I'm thinking about mine, and I never show any selfies. Like I have a complete resistance to selfies, but I do put myself on video. So it very much depends on you.
yeah, totally. And here it's because showing your face on social media, showing your face on Facebook is one of the most highly engaging type of posts. Okay. This is just shown by data, like any post that has a human face versus, an animation or
Mm.
anything else will give you more engagement, right?
Yeah.
And what it does, it's building trust, much, much more trust with you and your audience over time. you're, building that credibility that you're, a real human being, and, this is what you look like. You're putting it basically all out there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's so daunting, for us to do it. But it
Mm.
is so important, for business, especially if you're in the personal branding space. Of course, there's like, super famous artists like, I don't know, Seb Lester, who has never posted any photos of him. His work
Oh
speaks
yeah,
for
that's a good
himself.
point. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I guess it also really it depends on the context, right? As Gary Vee talks about a lot, it's about what platform it is that you're posting stuff on and what people come to expect when you're on that platform. So for me, I'm obviously making all kinds of mistakes by only sharing illustrations and text on Instagram, for example, because I know that people come to Instagram, they're in it's like they're stepping into an entirely new world, right? And everything about the social dynamics shifts, and people expect people to be sharing kind of trendy, cool, hip pictures of the account holder. But even, I know that, but I still hold back.
I think it really depends, what people follow. There's so many different types of accounts
True.
out there. So I don't think it's right or wrong. I think,
Yeah.
you're using the medium and the creativity on how to express what you want to express at that moment.
Yeah.
So it could be, text over video or text over image. I mean, there's so much, mediocre and crappy content out there, not yours or mine, but, in general.
Yeah.
In general, the level of content creation is so, like, mediocre to crap.
Mm.
Okay. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but there's only like 1% of the population that is creating amazing, amazing content. And that's why good content always, always will float to the top. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
There's
the thing
no
is, I
doubt
think I
about
think a lot of people probably get the impression that there's a ton of amazing talent on social media because we tend to follow, obviously, the people that we like, right? So we're always kind of being barraged by amazing stuff
it.
continually, right? So we kind of, I think it's
Totally.
quite easy to fall into that trap of thinking, gosh, I kind of suck here because everyone else seems to be so amazing.
Yeah, but they're amazing, but they're also consistent. So
Yeah.
with social media, it's all about consistency and, repetition almost, right?
Right.
So if you want to have like that six pack or, that bikini body for
Hmm.
summertime, you have to do sit-ups every day, right?
Mm.
And the sit-ups every day, they're going to help you, get more into shape. They're going to, start getting you fit so that you can be ready for summertime. It's the same exact thing as social media, believe it or
Yeah.
not,
Mm.
that the more you do post, the more you're in creative mode, the easier it becomes and the better your content's going to get. Because, your first piece of artwork, your first photograph, your first post is going to be crap, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? If you do it every day, it's going to improve immensely over time.
Mm.
So,
I agree with that 100%. Yeah. Consistency is definitely underrated. I think so is quantity. I think obviously people tend to focus on the quality stuff, which is obviously important. But I think quality is it's kind of a given, isn't it? You can't not be putting out very high quality stuff. It's really about the ability to show up consistently, isn't it?
I totally agree. Yeah, the quality is, I, you know, I have to always support quality over quantity,
Yeah.
um, because it's not necessarily about the frequency and how often you're posting, but it's really about, the consistently having good quality. That's
So no
what's
pressure then, right?
important.
I can see that being like quite a frightening prospect for many, and this is probably why so many people hold back, entirely, is because they see needing to put out a lot of amazing stuff. They've got their businesses to run, but on top of it, they've got to do all this work. How have you managed to, I guess, persuade people who are worried about that kind of stuff about putting out plenty of content? and also maintaining it yourself. Do you ever come across challenges with regards to just like the sheer amount of stuff that we're kind of expected, in quotes, to create?
So yeah, there is a lot of content that needs to be created to have a social media strategy. But good news is a lot of people don't realize that they already have tons and tons of content that's already ready to be posted. It just might need to be reformatted, especially for people like you and I, or other creatives or other agencies. Like the content's there. It's just a matter of formatting it and making it engaging and relevant, right?
Right.
Uh, for example, if you are a video production company, or if you're a motion graphic design company, you've been doing motion graphic design for, let's say, 5 years. You have plenty of B-roll content and stuff that might not have gotten used, behind the scenes, work in progresses. That stuff is all valid to share on social media. But you don't just share it. You have to tell a story behind it, right? You can't just post to post content. You must always have a reason why you're posting it. And if you can share, a little story about the piece of artwork or about the design, even better.
Yeah, I've kind of not been the ideal representative of creating a story for everything that I've shared. I've gotten into the habit sometimes of sharing content just for the sake of it, and I can totally see the value in not only the quality now. It's also about kind of attaching that story and context to it, and it's so valid a thing to do, because why put something out there that isn't going to have the kind of most potential of what kind of impact it can create, and a story will create that, right? A story is one of the best ways to, from what I've seen, whenever I've remembered to incorporate story in to what I'm sharing, I've seen the best response.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
that's one of the secrets to creating an engaging post, is to make people feel an emotion, right? Because emotional content is 200% more engaging. So how do you create emotional content? You've got to use storytelling. That is one of the oldest forms of communication that we've had since caveman ages, right? Is storytelling.
Yeah,
So
it's what makes us human, isn't it? I think the whole storytelling thing. If I don't know if you've read any of Lisa, I think her name's Lisa Crone, who wrote about the
no,
kind of
but I guess it sounds interesting.
Yeah, I'll need to double check on the name, but she wrote a lot of interesting stuff about how basically the thing that separates us from animals is the fact that we can hold images in our minds and tell people about things that have happened in a kind of linear way. And as you say, storytelling is the thing, isn't it? It's the thing that binds us as people.
It is what creates people to come together and share and relate and have empathy, right, for each other through storytelling. And those are the type of posts that you see the most people having conversations about, the most people liking, sharing, and commenting, is when a post is giving you that emotional that emotional feeling through storytelling.
Yeah.
So if you are an amazing storyteller, then you are going to be amazing at social media, because that's all what social media posts are. Each post is a story of something, right? So it's up to you on how good you can tell that story.
Yeah, I love that. Can you give us an example of an example an example of an example when you used a story, say in your own social media or something for a client, when it went really well, worked?
Let me
Or
think.
just a kind of
Yeah,
theoretical example. Yeah.
yeah. So let's use the example of what's going on now in Australia with you know,
The
the
fires.
the
Yeah.
brush fires. We're actually, trying to come up with a way that we can, help the disaster relief in
Mhm.
Australia. And the way that we're coming up uh, with the content is not necessarily like telling, making an announcement and sharing the same facts that, 12 million acres of homes have burned, or acres of land have burned,
Right, because
and
you're just
there are
repeating the
half a
news.
billion. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that is what's happened. But what's more interesting is if you share a real life story of something that has actually happened to um, somebody that was very affected by the fires, which I don't have the story yet, but
Hmm.
um, to give you an example of how you would think about
I guess
creating
I guess
content.
one of the images that comes to mind is for example, a koala bear needing water, right? Who's kind of crawled out of the
Mm,
forest, and
yeah,
he was thirsty and was looking
yeah.
for help, and this family stumbled across this koala and gave him water, and um, the koala lived happily ever after, type thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the imagery, some of the imagery of the koalas, being burnt and being trapped in the forest have been horrific. So,
Yeah,
uh, every each of those animals have had a story, or each of the people involved had a story
yeah,
in what's going on. So it's up to us to, as storytellers, to, give a voice and share that story on social media or on whatever platform it is.
mm.
Um,
Yeah. And I think more than anything, it's about being able to serve, right? Always having that idea in mind of service to whoever's reading that story in such a so that when it comes down to writing the story, you're thinking about how can this story actually benefit the reader rather than it just simply being a statement of a list of facts. It has to
mhm.
contribute to something, right? To some kind of an emotional shift. But I think even beyond that, right? It's about kind of sharing insights around what's actually going on at the heart of the fires, in a way that is emotional, obviously, in a way that is revealing a story. But you're kind of serving someone because you're revealing new information in the package of a story, I guess.
Exactly, which will be much more relatable,
Mm,
for someone that's across the world that's not in Australia. So,
right.
relatability, creating content that's relatable is really important. That creates that human to human connection.
Or human to koala connection. Right.
Exactly.
Nice. Um, so storytelling, yeah, that's something that's so often overlooked, and I can see the power in that. Um, might be worth doing kind of like a side study, or just doing a little bit of uh, just learning how stories work and how stories lend themselves to engagement, and also serving the audience that you have. Easy to overlook, but powerful stuff.
So
So yeah.
there's a great book for your listeners called The Story Brand. It's by Donald Miller. It's a New York Times bestseller, and it's a really great resource on how to actually create a story for your business or brand.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think I might have to read that. Story Brand by Mr. Miller. Is it Miller? You're still there, right? Didn't lose you, Dot.
Yeah, sorry,
Oh, right.
the connection kind of cut out, but it's called A Story Brand. Okay,
Hmm.
Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller.
Donald Miller. Yeah,
And it's a book about storytelling and how to actually create a story for your brand.
right. I think social media gives us a nice excuse to become, knowledgeable about storytelling and kind of get back to that ancient art that brings humans together. I think it's a nice and positive side to social media. Social media can get a little bit dodgy in parts, and we can obviously talk about that another time. But I love seeing how social media can kind of really stir up one's creativity and ability to connect. And as long as we focus on the good it can do for ourselves and our businesses, I can see, yeah, totally see the power in it. So as we
Absolutely.
close, because we're coming to a close fairly soon. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I said I totally agree, and that's why I'm in this business, because social media is, a way for us to spread positivity and connect humans, and get people together in a positive way, for
Right.
good causes, and yeah. So
Yeah,
that's why I love doing what I do.
I can see why, and it's been really useful to get hold of all these new insights around how effective social media can be, not only in connecting other people to us, but also kind of improving and enlivening our own experience, right? Because it's, for one thing, for me, the thing I've loved about social media and kind of having social media just around, right, and all the different platforms that I can contribute to, it's giving me an opportunity to grow myself as a person, and sort of explore my creativity and do a ton of things that I otherwise would never have done if social media wasn't around. So, for example, writing hundreds of articles over the years that I would have never bothered with if I didn't have an outlet that I could create for, and then have people benefit from the reading of that stuff. And it's obviously through the repetition and the quantity has led to improving my skills in that. So I would say to people who are a bit dubious about social media, first and foremost, right, see it as a means to develop your own creativity, develop your own skills, and grow.
Absolutely. That's the only way you can get better, is by practicing every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, totally agreed. Cool, Dot. So I really appreciate that. Tons of useful insights. I'm sure my listeners are going to love that. Where can we find out more about what you're up to and the projects you're working on, and that kind of stuff?
Well, since I basically live on social media, you can hit me up
Yeah.
on Instagram at @dotlung, at DOTLUNG. You can also check out my website. We won like 5 different awards
Mm.
worldwide on it. It's
Yeah, it's an awesome website.
DOT. So that's also at DOTLUNG, and you can contact me from there. So thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
My pleasure. Thanks again.